I'd like to announce that, as of today, Linda will be stepping down from her role as CEO due to personal reasons." Mark's voice cut sharply through the festive air of the meeting room, silencing all conversations instantly. The room, decorated elegantly to celebrate our company's 10th anniversary, turned abruptly cold. Colleagues' eyes widened, shock rippling visibly across their faces as they stared alternately at Mark and me. I stood very still, my heart momentarily frozen in disbelief. But I refused to give Mark the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I offered a calm, measured smile, smoothing my hands over my tailored navy dress. "Congratulations on your honesty," I said softly, allowing the words to settle heavily in the stunned silence. "My name is Linda Morrison. I'm 42 years old, and until a minute ago, I was the proud co-founder and CEO of Thrive Tech, the startup my husband Mark and I built together from nothing. I had given this company my days, my nights, and nearly every ounce of my energy, pouring years of dedication into its growth while Mark focused on his own ambitions. My gaze swept across the room, landing on Julia, our brilliant, beautiful marketing director. Julia, whom I had personally mentored, guiding her career and advocating fiercely for her advancement. Now, she stood avoiding my gaze, her eyes locked firmly on the polished wooden floor. It didn't escape my notice that she positioned herself closer to Mark, her body language betraying what I had recently uncovered. Glancing around at the other employees, I caught subtle looks of sympathy and discomfort. It dawned on me bitterly that their reactions confirmed they had known, or at least suspected, Mark's betrayal with Julia, but had remained silent, unwilling, or afraid to speak the truth. I gave a polite nod and rose from my chair. "I'll need some time to transition responsibilities." As I turned to leave, I carefully retrieved an envelope from my handbag, a thick, carefully prepared document, and placed it deliberately in front of Mark. He glanced down at it, his eyes narrowing with alarm as the weight of its contents registered. "What's this?" he asked, a slight tremor betraying his forced calm. I met his eyes with serene confidence. "Something for you to read later," I replied evenly, betraying nothing of the satisfaction rising within me. Outside the meeting room, the corridor stretched ahead, empty and quiet, the silence punctuated only by the muffled whispers behind the closed door. Moments later, hurried footsteps echoed behind me, and Mark appeared, his face flushed, eyes blazing with barely contained panic. "Linda, what exactly is this?" he hissed urgently, brandishing the envelope in one hand, knuckles white with tension. I regarded him calmly, keeping my voice gentle yet resolute. "You'll find out soon enough, Mark. Linda, this isn't some kind of game." I stopped him with a quiet lift of my hand. "No," I said softly, a hint of a hidden smile at the corners of my lips. "It's certainly no game." I walked away without another word, savouring the sensation of power shifting in my favour. Mark had underestimated me for years, too absorbed in his own image to notice that I had quietly been planning my next move. The envelope I'd given him wasn't simply a goodbye, it was the beginning of something far more impactful, something that would soon reveal just how thoroughly prepared I had been for this very moment. As I stepped out of the building, memories flooded my mind, vivid and relentless. 10 years of my life, a decade of dedication, sacrifice, and relentless determination flashed before my eyes. Mark always had big dreams and a restless spirit, qualities that initially drew me to him, but it was I who kept Thrive Tech grounded in reality. While he chased every shiny new idea, it was me who mortgaged our house, managed finances, handled personnel issues, and maintained crucial client relationships. My youth, my ambition, even my personal aspirations were all subordinated to nurture this dream into reality. Yet Mark rarely appreciated those silent, exhausting battles I fought daily. His contributions were brilliant but fleeting. Every new venture he started was abandoned halfway, leaving me to quietly pick up the pieces. Julia's influence had sharpened Mark's ambitions, turning his fleeting ideas into a calculated plan to betray me. I was the constant, unwavering force behind ThriveTech, yet somehow I had become invisible, overshadowed by Mark's charm and charisma. 3 months ago, I'd noticed irregularities in our company accounts, transfers to a vendor I didn't recognize, expenses Mark couldn't explain. I could have confronted him then, but I waited. I'd spent 5 years as a financial analyst before becoming CEO. I knew how to follow a money trail. What I found was damning. Mark had funneled company funds to cover dinners, trips, even a deposit on a condo, all for Julia. He thought I was too busy running the company to notice. He was wrong. I dug deeper. Mark had been siphoning capital, bit by bit, to fund their escape plan. They intended to push for a sale of ThriveTech, letting Mark cash out his shares for millions, then disappear with Julia to some tropical haven. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a calculated strike against everything I'd built. The betrayal sliced through me, raw and undeniable. How could he, after everything we had built together? How could Julia, someone I'd mentored and trusted implicitly, so easily discard our bond? Amid the anguish, a memory rose sharply. An early morning 10 years prior, when Mark and I were young, ambitious, and in love. He'd insisted on a clause to protect the company. Any founder who breached loyalty by misusing funds or undermining the company's interests would forfeit their shares. The irony was bitter. Mark, so worried about protecting his stake, had drafted his own downfall. I'd kept a copy of that agreement in a locked drawer, its pages yellowed but its terms ironclad. The bitter irony nearly made me laugh out loud. The clause Mark demanded would now serve as his undoing. Armed with this realization, I wasted no time. Quietly, methodically, I compiled evidence, bank records, emails, even texts I'd screenshot from Mark's carelessly unlocked phone. "We'll sell after the gala," he'd written to Julia. "Linda won't see it coming." But I did. I filed a lawsuit in commercial court, kept under seal to avoid tipping Mark off. I also prepared a motion to suspend his ownership rights pending the case, ensuring he couldn't sell his shares or sabotage the company further. All these documents lay waiting, like soldiers poised for battle, ready for the perfect moment. The envelope I handed Mark in the meeting wasn't merely symbolic. It was a silent declaration of war, carefully orchestrated to safeguard the company I loved, the company I had sacrificed so much to build. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed. "Sophie, Mom, are you okay?" Her voice trembled. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said. "Don't worry, I will handle everything." I'd shielded her from the truth to protect her final school year, but soon I'd tell her everything. As I reached my car, the afternoon sun warmed my skin, starkly contrasting the cold betrayal I'd just faced. Yet, strangely, I felt a new sense of clarity, even freedom. Mark had underestimated me for the last time. The battle ahead would be fierce, but I had spent a lifetime preparing for precisely this fight. Mark might have initiated this betrayal, but I would decide its outcome. Arriving home, I felt a heaviness settle over me as I stepped into the familiar warmth of our shared space. I climbed the staircase slowly, each step echoing memories of better days, days when Mark and I had shared dreams instead of betrayals. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, needing to change out of my gala dress, and opened the closet. My heart twisted sharply at the sight that greeted me, and Mark had already packed several suitcases, carefully arranged at the back, his clothes meticulously folded, his passport neatly tucked alongside an airline itinerary for 2 to Bali, confirming everything I'd suspected. Bali. It was supposed to be our destination, a long-promised getaway to celebrate our success. Now it symbolized his betrayal, an escape he planned not with me, but with Julia. My phone buzzed incessantly, lighting up with a steady stream of calls and messages. Colleagues, friends, loyal clients, even Mark's parents reached out, all demanding answers to the chaos unleashed at the anniversary gathering. I silenced the device, unwilling to explain or justify myself to anyone at this moment. Only one person deserved reassurance, and I sent a single calming message to my younger brother, Ethan. "Don't worry, I know exactly what I'm doing." His reply was swift and comforting. "Always trust you. Just say the word if you need anything." Hours passed before I heard Mark's car roar into the driveway, the garage door slamming shut moments later. He stormed through the door, fury etched plainly across his face, and hurled the envelope I'd left at him onto the kitchen table, scattering papers violently. "Linda, you have no right to do this!" Mark shouted, his voice raw with anger and disbelief. "Freezing my shares, filing a lawsuit. This is our company." I calmly sipped my tea, steadying my hand as I lowered the cup. My eyes met his unflinchingly. "No right," I echoed quietly. "You betrayed everything we built. Loyalty was your idea, remember?" His face contorted, caught between rage and something else, perhaps panic. Perhaps the dawning realization of his vulnerability. His tone abruptly softened, shifting strategy as he tried a desperate play for sentimentality. "Linda, remember when we had nothing?" he pleaded, his voice trembling. "All those nights we stayed awake, building our dreams from scratch. Those struggles, they meant something. You can't just throw everything away over a mistake." He leaned forward, as if proximity could rekindle something lost. I let out a bitter, humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Oh, you remember those nights, do you?" My voice was deceptively gentle, each word precise and clear. "Then surely you also remember who covered payroll from our personal savings when Thrive Tech nearly collapsed, who remortgaged our home to keep the company afloat when your brilliant ideas kept falling short, who kept the lights on, Mark, who made sure Sophie had a home to come back to." Mark's mouth tightened, eyes flickering with embarrassment, shame perhaps, but he said nothing. Silence stretched between us, heavy with the unspoken truth he had conveniently forgotten. Reaching into my bag, I retrieved a small digital recorder. Mark eyed it suspiciously as I pressed play. His own voice echoed clearly from the speaker, arrogant and dismissive. "Linda won't dare challenge me. She needs me too much to ever take a stand." Julia's laugh followed, sharp and mocking. "So we sell, cash out, and start fresh?" she'd asked. "Exactly," Mark had replied. "She'll never see it coming." Mark's face drained of colour, disbelief mingling with sudden panic. He took a shaky step back, gripping the countertop for support. "You recorded me?" he demanded weakly, horror-stricken. "Yes," I replied, my tone calm, devoid of emotion. "I suspected your plans, and I needed proof." "This is illegal," he protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, it's entirely legal," I said evenly, "given it was recorded in my office, our company's premises, and Mark, I didn't record your private moments with Julia, just the ones where you plan to steal from me." Desperation sharpened Mark's voice, and he resorted to his final, most manipulative tactic. "What about Sophie?" he snapped, invoking our 14-year-old daughter as a shield. "Have you thought about how this will affect her? She's only 14, Linda. She needs her parents." A cold fury ignited within me at his audacity. My voice hardened immediately, the words slicing through his emotional manipulation. "You didn't think about Sophie when you signed those papers behind my back, Mark. You didn't think about our daughter when you planned to betray the very company that supports her future. You weren't thinking of her when you booked those tickets to Bali. Mark's bravado crumbled further as I delivered my final blow. There's something else you didn't know, Mark. Julia's employment contract included side deals for unearned equity, breaching company bylaws. I reported her to the board last week, and her claim to any shares is void. Your plan to transfer assets through her, it's over. Mark's eyes widened in horror, his entire facade collapsing instantly. He stood utterly defeated, the full magnitude of his mistakes finally dawning upon him. His meticulously planned betrayal was unravelling rapidly, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, and utterly alone. In that moment, watching Mark's world crumble before me, I felt no joy, only a quiet, resolute sense of justice. He had underestimated me, believing me too dependent, too loyal, too weak to fight back. But his greatest error was in assuming that silence equaled submission. You made your choice, Mark, I said quietly, my voice steady. Now live with it. Just as Mark's voice escalated into another desperate tirade, the doorbell rang sharply, cutting through the tension like a knife. I stood, calmly smoothing my dress as I moved to open the door. My brother Tom, a successful corporate attorney known for his meticulousness and loyalty, stood on the doorstep, a reassuring presence. Linda, he said softly, eyes assessing me quickly for signs of distress. I came as soon as I could. Thank you, Tom, I replied quietly, stepping aside to let him enter. Mark scowled fiercely as Tom moved purposefully toward the dining room, pulling documents and legal files from his briefcase with practiced efficiency. Mark's voice erupted again, harsh and desperate. Linda! This has to stop! You're destroying our family, Linda. Can't you see that? Tom shot Mark a steely glance, voice steady yet firm. From what I see, Mark, you're the one who lit the match. Linda is just protecting herself and your family from getting burned even further. Mark glared at him. Stay out of this, Tom. This is between me and my wife. Not when you're defrauding her company. Tom shot back. I've seen the evidence. You're lucky she's only going for your shares and not criminal charges. Mark's bravado faltered, but he didn't back down. You're both blowing this out of proportion. I just made a mistake any man could make. Linda, you can't throw away 10 years over this. I met his gaze, unflinching. You threw it away, Mark. I'm just making sure you don't take Thrive Tech with you. He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand. Save it for court. He left, the door slamming behind him. For a few moments, silence hung heavy in the room. Then Tom exhaled slowly and reached for the bottle of wine on the sideboard. Let's take a breath, he said, pouring 2 glasses and handing one to me. He's scared, Tom continued, his voice calm but resolute. He knows he's losing. Good, I replied, raising my glass to his. The crystal rims clinked softly. He should be. Tom set his glass down and rolled up his shirt sleeves, refocusing on the task at hand. All right, he said, spreading the documents out neatly across the dining table. We need to be ready. I watched as he worked methodically, organising papers into labelled stacks, cross-referencing files and highlighting key sections. Everything you need for tomorrow's hearing is right here, Tom reassured me, finally handing me a meticulously prepared folder. His eyes met mine with quiet certainty. You've got this, Linda. The next morning, I met Sophie at her school's coffee shop, a cosy spot she loved. She slid into the booth, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes searching mine. Mum, Dad says you're trying to ruin him. What's going on? I took her hand, my heart aching. Your dad made some choices, sweetheart. Choices that hurt the company and our family. I'm fixing it, but it's going to be messy. I explained the basics, Mark's affair, the financial betrayal, keeping the details light to spare her. Her face hardened, a mix of her father's fire and my resolve. "He lied to me," she said, her voice small. "He said we were fine." "I know," I said, squeezing her hand. "But we will be. You and me." Later that morning, Thrive Tech's conference room buzzed with quiet tension, shareholders whispering anxiously among themselves. The shareholders' meeting was in full swing, with Mark at the head of the table, spinning his version of events. Julia sat to his right, her posture stiff, her eyes darting nervously. I timed my entrance carefully, stepping through the doorway at precisely the right moment to catch Mark off guard. His face paled visibly as I entered confidently, Tom by my side, folder firmly in hand. The room instantly fell silent, every eye watching closely. "Linda," Mark stammered, attempting to regain his composure. "You weren't supposed to—" "Attend," I interjected, smiling coolly. "As a co-founder and shareholder, my presence is absolutely justified, and given recent events, necessary." Without waiting for Mark's response, I took my seat calmly at the head of the table, opening my folder deliberately. Tom stood silently beside me, a reassuring presence. "Gentlemen, ladies," I began steadily, my voice clear and authoritative. "I apologize for disrupting your agenda, but critical new information must be addressed immediately. Mark Morrison has violated our founding agreement, specifically the breach of loyalty clause he himself established 10 years ago. Mark sputtered indignantly, rising from his chair. "That's an outrageous accusation." Ignoring him, I laid the evidence methodically onto the table. Copies of bank statements, transaction histories, and the voice recordings implicating him and Julia. Mark's earlier bravado evaporated, his protests diminishing under the weight of indisputable evidence. The shareholders reviewed the documents rapidly, their faces shifting from shock to clear resolve. After a tense silence, Henry Thompson, one of our oldest investors, spoke decisively. "These actions clearly breach our agreement. Mark, you've left us no choice but to support Linda." Julia, pale and visibly shaken, had attempted to slip quietly into the background, but Tom, calm yet authoritative, motioned discreetly for security. Moments later, 2 uniformed guards approached her firmly. "Ms. Julia Reed, you signed an employment contract with unearned equity, which violates state labour laws. The Department of Labour is already investigating. You're hereby relieved of your duties pending further investigation," Tom announced firmly. Julia's eyes widened in shock as she was escorted briskly out, protestations muffled by the closing door. I rose from my seat, addressing the room with composed authority. "Due to the gravity of these breaches, I propose an immediate suspension of Mark Morrison's management authority, pending judicial review." The shareholders murmured their agreement without hesitation, Henry nodding solemnly. "Linda, in light of these circumstances, we request you return, as interim CEO, to stabilise Thrive Tech during this challenging period." I inclined my head, accepting gracefully. Mark, trembling with barely contained fury, stormed from the room without another word, realizing the power had irrevocably shifted. As the meeting adjourned, colleagues approached, some offering support, others apologies for their silence. I accepted both with grace, but my focus was already on the next step. 2 weeks later, we stood in a stark commercial courtroom, the sterile lighting amplifying the severity of the occasion. The presiding judge, a stern but fair woman known for her incisive legal mind, reviewed the documents meticulously. Mark sat rigidly across from me, flanked by a lawyer hastily retained and clearly overwhelmed by the scope of evidence Tom had assembled. The judge peered over her glasses sharply, addressing Mark directly. "Mr. Morrison, your founding agreement explicitly contains a breach of loyalty clause. The evidence provided by Ms. Morrison is both credible and substantial. Unauthorized diversion of company assets constitutes a fundamental violation of your contractual obligations." Mark's lawyer stammered weakly, attempting a rebuttal. Your Honour, Mr. Morrison disputes. She raised a hand sharply, silencing him instantly. The documentation, including financial records and recorded conversations, leaves little room for dispute. I see no ambiguity here. Mark's shoulders sagged visibly, defeat etched deeply across his features. Mr. Morrison, your actions, unauthorized transfers, plans to sell without co-founder consent, violate the agreement's terms. She paused, letting the weight settle. I rule that the freeze on Mr. Morrison's shares remains. Mrs. Morrison retains majority control as primary shareholder. Mr. Morrison's stake is reduced to a minority share, as stipulated, pending final asset division in 30 days. The courtroom remained silent for a moment, absorbing the gravity of the decision. Mark stared blankly, realizing too late the irreversible consequences of his reckless betrayal. As the judge adjourned the session, Mark turned to face me one final time, his voice barely audible. Linda, this can't be it. 10 years our family, doesn't it mean anything? I met his pleading gaze calmly, feeling neither vindication nor sorrow, only an enduring sense of justice. It meant everything, Mark. That's why your betrayal cut so deep. You chose your path, Mark. Now, you must walk it. Leaving the courtroom, Tom gently squeezed my shoulder. You did well. Thrive Tech is safe now. Yes, I replied softly, breathing deeply for the first time in weeks. And finally, so am I. The fallout was swift and merciless. Julia vanished from Thrive Tech the day after the shareholders' meeting. Her office cleared out, her email account deactivated. Whispers among the staff confirmed she'd left Seattle entirely, likely fleeing the Department of Labor's investigation and the wreckage of her reputation. Mark was left alone to face the unravelling of his grand plans. One of our key investors, a venture capital firm Mark had courted for the sale of Thrive Tech, pulled their funding within 48 hours of the meeting. We don't back companies with unstable leadership, their curt email read. Mark's vision of cashing out and escaping to Bali with Julia crumbled, replaced by mounting legal fees and a company he could no longer control. I watched from my corner office, now reinstated as interim CEO, as the consequences of his choices closed in. I didn't revel in his downfall. Instead, I turned my focus to rebuilding. Thrive Tech had been my life's work, and I wasn't about to let Mark's betrayal define its future. Over the next few weeks, I worked with the board to restructure the company. We streamlined operations, cutting unnecessary expenses Mark had championed, like lavish client dinners and overpriced consultants. I hired a new CFO, a sharp woman named Priya, who shared my vision for transparency and stability. But my proudest move was launching Empower Code, a mentorship program for female founders in tech. I'd dreamed of this for years, back when I was too busy saving Thrive Tech to pursue it. Now, with the company on solid ground, I rented a small space downtown, a bright, open office with whiteboards and coffee machines where women could learn to navigate the cutthroat world of startups. The program gained traction quickly, with 10 mentees in the first month. A local tech magazine ran a feature calling Thrive Tech's recovery a stunning turnaround, and me, the CEO who refused to break. The headline made me smile. But the real victory was seeing young women pitch their ideas with confidence I'd once had to fight for. Mark, meanwhile, faded into the background. The court's final ruling, a month after the preliminary hearing, upheld the founding agreement in its entirety. Mark retained a minority stake, barely 5% of the company, while I held the controlling shares. His dreams of millions dissolved, and he sold his prized Tesla to cover his lawyer's fees. I heard through mutual friends that he'd moved into a modest apartment on the outskirts of Seattle, a far cry from the waterfront condo he'd planned with Julia. Our social circle, once loyal to his charisma, distanced themselves as the truth spread. Sophie, now 14, struggled with the betrayal, but began spending more time with me, her anger at her father softening into disappointment. "He called me yesterday," she told me one evening, her voice quiet. "He said he's sorry, but it doesn't feel real." "It might take time," I said, brushing her hair from her face. "You don't have to forgive him now, or ever. That's your choice." She nodded, leaning against me. "I'm proud of you, Mum. You didn't let him win." Her words stayed with me as I prepared for an interview with Tech Trend, a national outlet covering our turnaround. The journalist, a woman named Eleanor, with a sharp bob and sharper questions, sat across from me in my office, now redecorated with photos of Sophie and Empower Code's first cohort. "Linda," she began, "you've become a symbol for women in tech, a CEO who fought back against betrayal and won. How does it feel to come out on top?" I smiled, leaning back in my chair. "It's not about being on top," I said. "It's about protecting what I built and helping others build their own futures. Mark could have kept half of everything, our company, our life, if he'd been honest from the start. But trust, that's not something you split in half. Once it's gone, it's gone." Elena nodded, scribbling in her notebook. "And what's next for Thrive Tech and Linda Morrison?" "We're growing," I said. "New projects, new talent, and Empower Code is just the beginning. I'm not just a CEO, I'm a mentor, a mother, and someone who's learned that resilience isn't about avoiding the fall, it's about standing up stronger." The interview ran the following week, and my phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, mentees, and even strangers who'd read the piece. "You're an inspiration," one wrote. "Thank you for showing us we can fight back." I saved that message, a reminder of why I'd kept going. 6 months later, Thrive Tech was thriving. Empower Code had expanded to 25 mentees, and we'd secured a new round of funding from investors who valued our stability and vision. I moved into a new office for the program, a sleek space with views of Puget Sound, where I spent my evenings teaching women how to pitch, budget, and believe in themselves. Sophie visited often, sketching logos for the program between her homework. "You should call it Empower Code 2.0, she teased one day, grinning. "Version 2 of you, Mum." I laughed, pulling her into a hug. "Maybe you're right." Mark reached out once more, a quiet email sent late one night. "I made a mistake, Linda," he wrote. "I see that now. Is there any chance we could talk?" I read it, my heart steady, and closed my laptop without replying. Walking out of Thrive Tech's offices that evening, the city skyline bathed in the soft glow of twilight, I felt profound gratitude. Mark's betrayal had forced me into a painful but ultimately liberating confrontation with reality. In rebuilding Thrive Tech, I had simultaneously reclaimed myself, my independence, confidence, and sense of purpose clearer and stronger than ever before. As I stepped into the warm glow of the setting sun, I knew unequivocally that the darkest chapters were firmly behind me. Ahead lay countless possibilities, opportunities forged by hardship, but illuminated by hard-earned wisdom. Trust once shattered could never be fully restored, but from its fragments something new and far more resilient could rise, a stronger, wiser, and ultimately triumphant version of myself. I was Linda Morrison, CEO, mentor, mother, and a woman who'd found her own path, not through revenge, but through reinvention.